There are a few jobs where working 80 hours per week is considered a restriction, and being a resident physician is one of them. Today we're going to explore the argument for whether working such long hours is necessary for producing competent physicians, or if it's just unnecessary hazing. For anyone who's new here, my name is Sean Anderson, and I'm a second-year anesthesiology resident based in San Diego, California. Now, it's no secret that resident physicians work a ton in residency. For example, I'm a PGY2 anesthesia resident, so a CA1, and last month I worked in the ICU where I had 4 scheduled days off the entire month and basically worked 12-hour days with 5 24-hour shifts throughout the month. Right now I'm back in the OR, and this week I worked 2 days where I was in the OR from 6 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. One day where I was there from 6 a.m. to about 5:30 p.m. Another day I got out at 4 p.m., which was pretty good. And tomorrow I go in for a 24-hour in-house call shift. So tomorrow I'll get there at about 6:30 in the morning and leave the next day at about 7 a.m. I know, it's pretty cheeks. The hope is that I'll get some sleep during the shift, but that is definitely never a guarantee. But that's the life we chose, baby. But that doesn't make it right. So in short, residents work a lot. So in an attempt to balance resident education and safety, the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education, or ACGME, which is the body responsible for accrediting all graduate medical training programs, internships, residencies, and fellowships for physicians in the United States, implemented duty hour restrictions. These duty hour restrictions dictate how much residents and fellows are allowed to work. So if we look at the ACGME website, the duty hour standards include an 80-hour weekly limit averaged over 4 weeks, an adequate rest period which should consist of 10 hours of rest between duty shifts, a 24-hour limit on continuous duty, and up to 6 added hours for continuity of care and education, 1 day in 7 free from patient care and educational obligations averaged over 4 weeks, in-house call no more than once every 3 nights averaged over 4 weeks, and there's even an option for programs in some specialties to request an increase of up to 8 hours in the weekly hours. And that's if it benefits the resident's education and is approved by the RRC. The ACGME chose 80 hours as the upper limit, essentially to safeguard against the negative effects of chronic sleep loss, but also allow for adequate time for patient handoff and didactic learning. Now, here are some of the challenges with these restrictions. The duty limits are 80 hours per week averaged over 4 weeks, which means that you can still work more than 80 hours in any given week. And even if you're abiding by 80 hours per week, 6 days a week, you're still hitting about 14 hours of work per day. And because of the 6 added hours for didactic education, you can end up having didactics on your scheduled day off, which has actually happened to me. And luckily, my program and my team allowed me to move my schedule around so that I could actually have a dedicated day off, but that might not always be the case for everyone. And when it comes to 10 hours between duty periods, you're essentially going to hit that 10 hours on the T. In fact, the other day, I got stuck at the hospital until about 9 p.m. And per my anesthesia schedule, we start cases at about 7 a.m., 7:20 a.m. So that's exactly 10 hours. But I still had to drive home from the hospital and pre-op my patients for the next day, which took about until 10 p.m. that night. And then I still had to show up early to the hospital so that I could set up the OR for my cases. So even though on paper I had 10 hours between when I left the hospital and when I was scheduled to be back at the hospital, I was still working in that time. And 24 hours of continuous work is more than enough to experience the negative effects of sleep deprivation. In fact, according to the CDC, there are several studies that show that chronic sleep deprivation is similar to being intoxicated. For example, being awake for 17 hours is similar to having a blood alcohol concentration of 0.05%, and being awake for 24 hours is similar to having a BAC of 0.1%. For context, the United States defines legal intoxication for purposes of driving as a blood alcohol level of 0.08% or greater. So that means that driving after a 24-hour shift is comparable to drunk driving. Now, like I've already said, there are many responsibilities surrounding duty hours. So for example, I have to pre-op my cases for the next day, even on my days off. You also have to study for your board exams. For example, during residency, I've taken step 3, and now I'm preparing for my anesthesiology board exams. Thankfully, I have Board Vitals to help me with my studying, and they're actually the sponsor of this video. Board Vitals offers thousands of high-quality practice questions with detailed explanations, all curated by experts. I absolutely loved having Board Vitals when I was studying for Step 3, and I really wish I had them for Steps 1 and Step 2, but I'm very thankful that I now have them for my anesthesiology boards. By far, the most useful feature to me has been the ability to stratify questions by easy, medium, and hard. It's perfect for someone like me who's really early in their anesthesiology training and doesn't have a whole lot of experience yet. That way I can start with easier questions, get my foundations, and work my way up. It's helped me stay consistent with practice questions rather than being intimidated by concepts I haven't necessarily learned yet. And in general, it's always a good idea to start with your foundations and work your way up. You can also customize your question bank with testing mode, adaptive mode, tutor mode, and study mode, and that really allows you to study in a way that's best for you. And their tests look like the real deal. So you're studying in the same user interface that you're gonna have on test day, which I absolutely love. And their feedback to your responses and explanations to the questions are super detailed. And Board Vitals isn't just for the STEP exams or for anesthesiology residents. They've got resources for you, whether you're a radiology resident, NP, PA, nurse, pharmacist, podiatrist. You'll be able to find a question bank that's best for you. I'll have the link to Board Vitals in my description box below, and you guys can actually get 15% off using my coupon code Sean. Make sure to check them out. I think you guys will find Board Vitals very useful for any exams that you have to take. Thank you so much to Board Vitals for helping me pass my exams and for once again sponsoring the channel. Now I know it sounded really negative as far as resident work hours go, but let's look at the arguments that are actually in favor of long resident work hours. First off is the learning. The biggest argument for long resident work hours is pattern recognition and education. Although we do a lot of theoretical learning, a lot of our education comes from practice. That's why it's called practicing medicine. So you need to learn by doing things over and over and over again, often under very variable and stressful conditions. As an attending, you're gonna need to be prepared for anything that walks in through the door. You're the person that people are gonna turn to when a problem happens, and you need to be ready for that and well trained for that. And you want a lot of that experience to come from your residency training while you have supervision. And the only way to learn from experience is by being put in those situations. For all my Avatar The Last Airbender fans out there, Toph didn't know she could metal bend until she was already in the box. Sometimes you don't know what you're capable of until you're already in the situation. I remember the other week I was on call for the OR as well as any of the code blues that happened in the hospital overnight, and we arrived to a code blue that we were paged for, and as soon as we walked in, everyone turned to us and they were like, "Thank God, anesthesia's here." And I literally turned behind me and was like, "Me? I'm the one that you guys are thankful for is here?" It's a crazy experience that requires a lot of composure and resilience, but that's the only way we're gonna get better. Another argument for long duty hours is continuity of care. So with 24-hour shifts, for example, you're there during the day, you went on rounds, you know the patients, what happened during the day, so when you go into the evening, you're very familiar with your patients and what's going on with them. Now, of course, we have handoff systems in place for when you have day teams and night teams, but objectively, there is some benefit to having a physician there overnight that was there during the day. It decreases the chances of not handing off any important information. Now, when you're working those long night shifts, you also have increased autonomy. You essentially have less help in the hospital at night. Your attending is typically at home, just ready to be paged by you or called by you if something happens. And you typically try to avoid calling them for things that you can manage on your own. So the training wheels come off a little bit. And the last argument is in terms of resilience. When you're an attending physician, you still have long hours, have to take call, and so you want to build up that stamina as a resident. It forces you to learn how to balance your responsibilities at the hospital and also your life outside of work. If you can do it during residency where you have less control over your time, then theoretically you can handle it better when you're an attending and have more control. Now let's look at arguments that are against long resident work hours. And the first one is patient safety. Observational studies have found an increased error risk associated with longer hours and extended shifts. In short, that means that the longer a physician works, the more likely they are to make medical errors. But this is kind of a balancing act because another study found that when switching from 24-hour shifts to 16-hour shifts, medical errors actually increased. And researchers actually identified increased workloads as a confounding variable leading to more errors during shorter shifts. So they were working fewer hours, but there were more things packed into those hours. So basically that means you can't just look at the total amount of hours, but you also need to factor the workload and responsibilities during those hours. If a doctor is spread too thin with too many patients, then it's going to lead to errors. The next argument against long hours is, of course, physician well-being. Long work hours contribute to chronic fatigue, burnout, depression, and decreased career satisfaction. This causes some doctors to switch specialties or just completely leave medicine altogether. And there are even safety considerations outside of the hospital. Fatigue from a long shift puts you at higher risk of getting into a car accident after you leave the hospital. And this doesn't just apply to residents. In fact, a PA I used to work with in the ER back when I was a scribe actually got into a car accident after leaving their shift. And she attributed it to her being tired while she was at the wheel. I even know residents that have gone back to the call rooms after their 24-hour shift is done just to get a few hours of sleep in before they drive home, which is very responsible of them, but unfair that they have to do that when they should just be able to go home safely. The next argument against these long work hours is suboptimal learning. After several consecutive long days at work, there comes a point where you start having diminished returns on learning and work becomes more about endurance rather than education. And I've definitely felt that way. If I've been in the OR for the past 6 days and I finally get one day off, I am probably more focused on getting everyone through the case safely rather than thinking about what I could be learning from that case. Like, I'm just trying to get done with the day, even if that means asking my attending for more help. Like, if residents are saying, I'm just trying to survive, that should really get us thinking about the fact that they're probably not getting a lot of learning in anymore. Now, a couple more arguments I want to make against these long work hours. So from a financial standpoint, we're getting paid as residents. I live in San Diego. We actually get paid quite well. You can check out my salary videos where I disclose exactly how much I make. We get paid pretty good here. I can't complain about that. But that pay is the equivalent of a full-time salary for someone like me who is functionally working 2 full-time jobs worth of hours. So although the salary is good, most people would be making a lot more money if they were getting paid for the same amount of hours that I'm working. Secondarily, there's more to life than medicine, and residents are basically at risk for so many other problems because of the training. For example, a lot of the women that are coming out of their training are already at the age where if they want to become pregnant, they're closer to being high risk. Some programs will pay to have them freeze their eggs, but you have to think that this is all stuff that they shouldn't really have to worry about. We're also missing very important events in our lives that typically happen during your 20s and 30s. For example, you yourself or your family members getting married, you losing a loved one such as a parent or relative. A lot happens over these 2 decades that physicians typically spend their training in. And I feel like a lot of the advocacy for resident duty hours doesn't really take that into account. Factor other things in like poor physical and mental health from the inability to keep a stable routine and eating habits. And you can see why a lot of us end up really burnt out by the time we finish our training. So although in this video I try to show the pros and cons, I tend to hover a little bit more to the side of there is still work that needs to be done. And it's gotten better for sure, especially with the growth of resident unions, but we need to keep talking about it. Otherwise, these big hospital systems and residency programs aren't gonna continue to wanna make positive changes. Anyway, at the end of the day, residency is tough. The hours are long, the learning curve is steep, and the line between growth and burnout is very, very thin. But I think it's important to remember why we do this. Those long nights, the 2 a.m. pages are what's gonna make you a competent physician that allows you to handle anything and save people's lives. That said, just because we can push through it doesn't mean we should have to. Residency hours should be sustainable, humane, and conducive for learning. Because at the end of the day, tired doctors are not better doctors. So whether you're a medical student looking ahead or a resident that's in the thick of it, just remember that your well-being and your residency training have to exist at the same time and are not mutually exclusive. We should all be advocating for a good balance. Thank you guys so much for watching, and a huge shout out again to Board Vitals for sponsoring this video. If you guys enjoy these kinds of topics, make sure to let me know with a like and comment down below. I always like to hear your guys' feedback. Anyway, that's all I got for now. Thank you so much again for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.